Welcome back. The Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General John Hyten, says it will take 10 years for the Defense Department to manage its data effectively. The department's new data strategy is the roadmap to get to that destination. Tara Murphy Dougherty is Chief Executive Officer of Govini. She and Bob Work are writing about data in the department in War on the Rocks. Tara, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program today. What's your takeaway from this new data strategy that the department has released?
Thanks, Francis. Overall, I think they have laid out an excellent roadmap. You know, Secretary Work and I laid out our own principles that we thought the department really needed to focus on as it gets a handle on data and the data management challenges it faces. And we saw a lot of that appear in the data strategy overall. So I would give it an excellent grade.
What do you think are the gaps between what you and Bob recommended in War on the Rocks back at the beginning of October and what the Pentagon actually produced?
So there are two that jump to mind for me immediately. And the first is really leveraging external data. The data strategy does a very good job, like I said, of highlighting the fundamental principles, the recommendations that will need to be adopted by DoD in order to better leverage data in a way that it is going to need to reverse the eroding military advantage that we have previously enjoyed, particularly vis-a-vis China. What it doesn't do is look outwardly very much, and that's a mistake, I believe. There is a tremendous ability of external data sources and external technologies that the department can use to leapfrog from a technological or development perspective. And if we're going to make progress on a faster timeline than a decade, that's going to be really critical.
And that's where I wanted to go next. You and Bob write that 10-year gap should disturb U.S. policymakers and mobilize them to act. What compresses that 10-year timeline, or is that not compressible, and this is just a function of the fact that it took the Pentagon longer than it should have to get here?
It's definitely compressible, and I wouldn't want to put words in his mouth, but I would bet money that Dave Spurk, the Chief Data Officer of the Department of Defense, would agree with me. And that's one of the reasons that I'm really excited to see him in this role. He brings phenomenal expertise. He had a number of accomplishments at U.S. Special Operations Command. And I think that we will see him do a few things to really advance the department and shrink that timeline. One is going to be working with the private sector in a really meaningful way and bringing in the right kind of private sector partners in order to make the kind of progress that we need. Another is, I think he's determined to get a handle on the federated approaches to data that are active in DoD. And part of that could risk actually slowing progress down if DoD thinks about this sequentially and feels the need to map the universe before it takes action. I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to endeavor to understand the universe, to create that mapping, to inform progress and move in parallel.
One of the recommendations that you and Bob wanted to see is eliminating bureaucratic data ownership. The data strategy addresses the data exchange between branches among all of the forces. Is that what you're referring to there, or is there something else that you're getting at?
That's exactly what we're referring to. In my experience working in national security, and indeed my experience working in the Pentagon, data is power. And that combined with a security posture has created an environment and a culture that does not foster transparency or sharing. And yet the department talks a lot about leveraging private sector best practices, about emulating emerging technology companies that are doing phenomenal things in the American economy. One of the principles of those companies is transparency and sharing information. It's a huge part of what allows you to move fast. I thought this is exactly a great example of an area where the strategy did a really good job of addressing the people aspect of this challenge and the cultural one as well.
We have a little bit more than a minute left, Tara. What incentivizes that, though, rather than just the department saying, this is our policy and this is what you should do, because we've seen that many times over the years in the Pentagon. It's not incentivized, so even though it's encouraged, it doesn't happen.
great point. People often feel like if I share my data, you're going to come for my money. And if we can establish the right metrics that are around performance and capability, not just capacity or a top line figure, that's what will truly change behavior, just as you suggest.
Tara Murphy Dougherty, thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Francis.